Hello everyone and welcome back once again. This is your science teacher here, and this time I am here with a new chapter of NCERT grade 6, that is the living organisms, characteristics and habitat. Students, in this chapter we are going to learn and discuss about the living organisms, their characteristics, environment components, different types of habitats and their way of adoption. Means to say how the animals adapt themselves according to their environmental conditions. Students, as you all know that the different regions in the world have various types of living creatures, and these creatures are termed as organisms. And students, in fact, the openings of volcanoes have also many small living organisms. And students, even our homes are not devoid of these tiny organisms. So students, this chapter also familiar you with everything that we see surrounding us, that are living, non-living, physical, chemical, etc. is called an environment. Students, this chapter defines that the region or place where an organism lives is termed as its habitat. And students, habitat is that place which gives an organism everything to survive, like food, shelter, proper weather conditions such as rainfall, heat, etc. to breed and flourish. And students, at the last, this chapter explains some characteristics of the living organisms such as their needs for food, respiration and excretion, response to the environment, reproduction, growth and movement. So students, now let's start. Now students, the first topic of this chapter is habitat and adaptation. Students, as I said earlier, that habitat is that surrounding where living organisms survive. And students, the organisms depend on their habitat for their food, water, air, shelter and other needs. And students, in a habitat, several kinds of plants and animals share the same habitat. Now students, let's understand that what are organisms. Students, living things that are capable of reacting to stimuli, reproduction, growth, etc. that are generally ranging from microscopic bacteria to elephants comes into the category of organisms. And students, these organisms are the plants and animals are found in the different types of habitats. For example, camels and cacti are those kind of living organisms that are generally found in deserts. In the same way, coconut and crabs are found in beaches, and the fishes and the other marine animals inhabited in the sea. Now students, let's understand some characteristic of the living organisms that makes them different from the non-living things. Students, as you all know that plants are living things, but students, they do not appear to move, whereas on the other hand, some non-living things like a car, a bus can move, but yet we cannot consider them as a living thing. So students, there are certain characteristics that differentiate the living from non-living. As the first one is that all living things on earth are made up of cells, whereas non-living things are not made up of cells. And students, these cells are the structural and the functional unit of any living organism. Secondly, living beings obtain and use energy. Next, all living beings on earth grow and develop. Nextly, all living things on earth reproduce in order to make survival of their species on earth. Nextly, all living beings adapt to their environment. Means to say, they can adapt themselves according to their environment. Lastly, all living things respond to their environment or stimuli. So students, these are some of the basic certain characteristics that differentiate living from non-living. Now students, let's understand the different kind of habitats that are generally found on Earth. As the first one is terrestrial habitat. Students, terrestrial habitats are those types of habitats that are generally found on land, like forest, grassland, desert, shorelines and wetlands. Now students, let's understand the first kind of habitat, that are deserts. And students, as I said, that deserts is also a type of terrestrial habitat. Students, as you all know that in deserts there are intense heat. So the living organisms that are generally found here, like snakes and rats, dig burrows in order to escape themselves from intense heat. And do you know why? Because they don't have long legs such as camel. And students, these animals come out only during the night when it is cooler. Nextly, students, in desert, plants' leaves are reduced to spines in order to lose little water through transpiration. And students, you are very well familiar with the process of the transpiration, in which the plants give out water in the form of the water vapor. So here in deserts, plants' leaves are reduced to spine in order to lose little water. Students, nextly, the stems of the desert plants have a waxy coating on them. And students, these waxy coating helps plants to lose little water. And students, not only this, in fact, in these desert plants, the photosynthesis process is not carried out in leaves. In fact, this process is carried out by the stem. Now nextly, the roots of the desert plants go deep into the soil in order to absorb water. And do you know, students, why? Because as you all know, there is scarcity of water in deserts. And now students, nextly, as I said, that the leaves in the desert plants are generally absent in order to lose little water. And students, some of the animals that are generally found here in these deserted areas are camels, kangaroo rats, snakes, etc. Now students, the second type of terrestrial habitat are mountain regions. Students, as you all know that here in mountain regions, the trees are cone shaped with slope like branches. And students, the leaves of the trees in these mountain regions are needle like. And students, do you know why? Because in order to slide off the rain and the snow easily. Now students, secondly, the animals that are generally found here in these mountain regions have thick fur on their body that provides them protection from cold. For example, like snow leopard. Nextly, the goats that are generally found here in these mountain regions have strong hooves. And students, these strong hooves helps these mountain goats to run on the rocky slopes. And students, generally the organisms that are found here are pines, mountain goats, yaks, sheep, etc. Now students, the next kind of terrestrial habitat are grasslands. Students, the most amazing characteristics of the animals of grassland areas are their body color. Students, like the light brown color of the lion helps it to hide in the dry grassland, and the presence of long claws helps it to capture the prey. Students, in the same way, deer has strong teeth to eat plant stems, and its long ears helps it to listen their predator movement. And students, not only this, animals like deer have also eyes on its side of the head, which help them to look in all the directions to look out for danger. And generally, the animals that are found here are elephants, giraffes, tigers, lions, etc. Now students, the next type of terrestrial habitat are rainforest. Students, as the name suggests, these habitat receives a lot of rain, and hence these rainforest areas rich in animal life. And students, as I said, that these areas receives heavy rainfall, and students, that's why different kind of mammals, amphibians, reptiles and all sorts of animals you can find here easily. And students, the climate here in rainforest is hot and humid, and so that's why here in these rainforests animals have to learn to adapt to survive in these environmental conditions. Now students, the next kind of terrestrial habitat are polar habitat. Students, as you all know that these type of habitats, means to say polar habitats, are very cold and windy. And do you know students why? Because due to their locations that are very far from equator. And students, the animals that are generally found here are carnivores, and they have very thick fur on their body that helps them to survive in this adverse condition. And students, whereas some animals in the polar regions blend in ice like the polar bear, and students, some other animals also hibernate, means to say go into long winter sleep in order to survive in this adverse condition. And generally the animals that are found here are polar bears, reindeers, penguins, etc. Now students, the next kind of habitat are aquatic habitats. Students, aquatic habitats are those kind of habitats that are generally found in and around bodies of water like lakes, rivers, ponds and wetlands, etc. So students, the first aquatic habitats is marine habitat. Students, this marine habitat comprises of ocean and seas. And students, as you all know very well that both these kind of habitats, means to say oceans and seas, have salty water. Students, this marine habitat are home to a wide variety of creatures like the most part of the fish population of the world. And students, these marine creatures are generally found in the estuaries, means to say estuaries are those places where the rivers and the ocean water meet. And students, not only this, in fact these marine creatures are also found in salty water. And students, these marine habitats are also a home of the world's largest mammal, that are whales, that migrate to long distances in order to cope up with the temperature changes in water. Now students, the next kind of aquatic habitats are oceans. Students, the organisms that are generally found in oceans have streamlined bodies and gills. And students, do you know why? Because these streamlined bodies helps them to swim in water, whereas these gills helps them to breathe in water. Students, as I said that the most organisms that are found in oceans have streamlined bodies, because these streamlined bodies helps them to swim in water. But there is an exception like octopuses that do not have any streamlined bodies. So students, that's why the octopus stay deep in ocean. But students, when octopus moving, they make a streamlined motion in order to swim in water. Now students, the world's largest mammal that we talked about earlier, means to say whales, have blowholes instead of gills on their body. And students, these blowholes enable them to breathe easily when they swim near the surface of water. Now students, the next kind of aquatic habitats is freshwater habitat. Students, these freshwater habitats generally comprises rivers, lakes, ponds, etc. And students, 3% of the world's water is accounted as fresh water, but still a different variety of species are generally found here in these freshwater habitats. So the animals that are generally found in these freshwater habitats are snails, worms, mollusks, etc. Now students, the next kind of aquatic habitats are ponds and lakes. Students, the plants that are generally found in these ponds and lakes are either completely submerged in water like hydrilla, whereas some other plants completely floating on the surface of water like water lily, lotus, water hyacinth, etc. And students, the plants that are generally found in ponds and lakes have roots that are much reduced in size because their main function is to just hold the plant in place, whereas some aquatic plants are long, hollow and light so that these can easily bend along with the water movement like water lily. And students, the next important characteristic of these aquatic plants are that the stem of these plants grow up to surface of the water, whereas the leaves and the flowers float on the surface of the water. Students, whereas the totally submerged plants that are found in these ponds and lakes have narrow and ribbon-like leaves. And students, due to their narrow and ribbon-like leaves, these plants can easily bend in floating water. Now students, the next important characteristics of these aquatic plants are that these plants have air spaces that helps them to enable the plant to float. And students, these floating plants also have waxy upper surfaces that makes them waterproof, and so the stomata are generally found on the upper surfaces which are exposed to air. Students, nextly, the animals that are found here in these ponds and lakes are adapted themselves to live both on land and water. For example, frogs, and that's why frog is also considered as amphibian. Now students, the last important topic of your this chapter is acclimatization. Students, acclimatization is the process in which an individual organism adjusts to a change in its environment and allowing it to maintain performance across a range of environmental conditions. And students, under this process, the organisms adapts themselves through by making small changes in the body over short period of time. For example, the changes that we generally observe in our body when we travel from plains to mountains. And students, the changes that we observe in ourselves is called as acclimatization. Now students, that's all about your chapter number 9, and with this topic here, your chapter number 9 is completed. Now I will be come back soon with another chapter. Till then, stay home, stay safe and stay healthy.